My deepest salutations to the lotus feet of Almighty. Before going to start the program, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Dr. K.S.R. Sarma, working as a professor in Sivasavan Institute of Management into Data Science Department. So it is a privilege for me to do the comparing for this session, for the wonderful session. So absolutely, as the teachers, we always believe in how to raise the cultural values as well as traditions with the students. So attending these kinds of platforms will give us lot of benefit, and in turn after reaching college, so we always try to inculcate so these kinds of values whatever we are acquiring here. So thank you very much for Samskruti Foundation for giving us these kinds of opportunities. Vidya nama narasya rupamadikam prachanna guptam dhanam. Knowledge is the finest ornament of a person and the hidden wealth that never can be lost, which is mentioned in Bhartrihari Subhashitam. With this timeless thought, I warmly welcome all the dignitaries, distinguished scholars, respected guests, and the participants to the 19th episode of the Samskruti Talks. Your gracious presence, which enriches this gathering and strengthens our shared pursuit of knowledge and dharma. Samskruti Foundation, Hyderabad, is a cultural and research organization committed to promoting Bharatiya heritage and the values as well as the knowledge traditions through research, education and public outreach. Its initiatives include Samskruti Adhyayana Kendra, initiatives including Samskruti Talks, conferences, workshops, youth programs, and forums such as Samskruti Adhyayana Kendra, Samskruti Culture and Leadership Centers, contributing to the cultural awareness, intellectual discourses, and the nation building. Today's program marks the 19th episode of Samskruti Talks series, featuring an insightful discourse on the thought-provoking theme, how would a Hindu Rashtra, Dharma Rajya look like? Now, I'd like to take privilege to invite Sri Debasish Mehti to kindly present the Suchanalu and introduce the distinguished attendees.
Thank you all for coming for the program today. I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce all the eminent personalities present with us here today. Mr. Chidirya Chandrasekhar ji, Additional Divisional Manager in LIC. Mr. Siddharth Ayyagiri, Public Policy Professional. DVS Krishna ji, Retired Senior Manager, Union Bank of India. Dhulipala Kishan Prasad ji, Retired General Manager, Andhra Bank. K. Keshavnath ji, Journalist. I. Vishnudatta Raya ji, Director of Work Accounts, Finance Department. Bhavesh Tripathi ji, Working Professional, UBS Group. Dr. Nagalakshmi Tata ji, Former Member Secretary, MGN CRE. V. Ramakrishna ji, Marketing Executive, SL Diagnostics. Challamalla Nikita Rao ji, National Convener. National Convener and International Secretary, Osmania University. Dr. Nalam Sudhakar ji, Ex-Director, ICAR, ATARI, Hyderabad Campus. Madan Mohan A ji is a student of law. B. Ramarao ji, retired ED at NTPC. प्रबोध दुबाका जी, मठ ट्रस्टी, श्री सुदर्शन कल्चर। श्री राम शास्त्री चेंबल जी, सीनियर वाइस प्रेसिडेंट, विशिष्ट इंश्योरेंस ब्रोकिंग। बालू नागराज जी, डायरेक्टर, VCMC प्राइवेट लिमिटेड। मकरंद पोलारकर जी, एरिया मैनेजर, एशिया रीजन, चंदियानी SPA। मृदुला विजय कुमार जी, रिटायर्ड सीनियर मैनेजर, यूको बैंक। शंकर भरद्वाज जी, इंडिपेंडेंट IKS स्कॉलर। डॉक्टर वदिपर्थी सूरी जी, रिटायर्ड सॉफ्टवेयर प्रोफेशनल। महिधारा सीतारामा शर्मा जी, रिटायर्ड बैंकर। मेजर जनरल डॉक्टर MN गोपीनाथन नायर, आर्म्ड फोर्सेस मेडिकल सर्विसेज। B वेंकटरमन जी, रिटायर्ड AGM फ्रॉम SBI। RV रामकुमार जी, फॉर्मर डायरेक्टर, IIT भुवनेश्वर। फनिंद्र गोलापल्ली जी, साइबर सिक्योरिटी आर्किटेक्ट, TCS। मधुसूदन झुंझुनू जी, CEO GSBS। श्रीनिवास मूर्ति तिगुल्ला जी, रिटायर्ड DM LIC। P रवि कुमार जी, डायरेक्टर टेक्निकल एंड प्रोजेक्ट्स, रिटायर्ड, हैदराबाद मेट्रो वाटर सप्लाई एंड सीवरेज बोर्ड। अनुराधा बकराजू जी, एडवोकेट, हाई कोर्ट ऑफ तेलंगाना। T वेणुगोपाल कृष्णा जी, रिटायर्ड बैंक एम्प्लॉय, कैनरा बैंक। थैंक यू.
Thank you very much for the beautiful introduction of the dignitaries as well as the guests. So I understood that lot of intellectual forces are here. So no doubt, ultimately, everybody is going to get benefit through their interactions. And undoubtedly, today's topic is quite relevant to the current generation of the students. So they must involve in how to build the nation by using the right political thought. धन्यवाद मिस्टर देवाशीष मेती. ओम श्री गणेशाय नमः. वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देवा सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा. Namaste. Respected elders, distinguished guests, members of the governing council, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Samskruti Foundation, I extend a warm welcome to everyone present here. Let us now begin the today's program by paying our respects to our motherland through Vande Mataram. I request everyone to kindly rise for Vande Mataram. I request everybody to be seated. My deepest salutations to Motherland. I now have a privilege of introducing the respected members of the Governing Council and the Director of Samskruti Foundation. So I am honored to introduce the Governing Council members, Dr. U.M. Chaudhary, ji, Sri K.S. Ramamurthy ji, and Sri T. Rambabu ji. Thank you very much. May we welcome them with a warm round of applause. Thank you, sir. Thanks for your presence here. The ancient wisdom says, Ano Badraha Kratavo Yantu Visvataha, which is mentioned in Rig Veda. May the noble thoughts come to us from every directions. To set the context for today's intellectually enriching session, I respectfully invite Dr. U.M. Chaudhary ji to address the gathering. Dr. U.M. Chaudhary ji is Director for Samskruti Adhyayana Kendra, Governing Council member of Samskruti Foundation. Dr. Chaudhary ji is the alumnus of IIT Bombay, worked as an additional general manager at BHEL R&D, and he was the Dean of Aurora Group of Institutions. Sir, may I request you to kindly come forward.
Thank you, Sharma ji. Respected attendees to today's function, senior functionaries, leaders from various walks of life, intellectuals, and other members who are present in this session today. By now, most of you are familiar with the event called Samskruti Talks. I have been telling that, but again, just to briefly sum up, it's a talk series which is a little over and above a normal talk series in that it is followed by a process after the talks. It's not that with the talk the theme ends. This Samskruti Talks is an important part of the activities of Samskruti Adhyayana Kendra unit of Samskruti Foundation. In Samskruti Adhyayana Kendra, we have chalked a path for ourselves to attempt to connect our ancient culture, actually it is Samskruti, but we call, for the want of a better word, culture, to the current public policy. And this Samskruti Talks is an important part of it. And therefore, this talk has been designed in a slightly different format. We don't have just question and answer sessions after the presentation by the speaker, but we have what we call interactive sessions in which the audience are welcome to share their views, express opinions, and give critical or vital information they think is important, so that it adds to the existing knowledge of us all. So that is one point which makes it different from such events elsewhere. Moreover, the theme itself is never forgotten. We have a data regarding that stored in us, and we try to process it and to use it for our purpose. Now let me come to why this is important for us. As I said, the one job that Samskruti Foundation has given to Samskruti Adhyayana Kendra is an attempt to link culture to public policy. Now I call this as a novel and a noble assignment. I will tell you why. It's novel because we have made inquiries and probes for a long period of time to find out if anybody is working on that theme of connecting culture to public policy, and found that really precisely that work has not been happening. For a long time we tried, and therefore it's novel. It has not been done before. And secondly, it is novel as well, because we are perhaps the major culture which has been existing from prehistoric times, if not early history times, and it is something which has maintained continuity, and therefore it is a vast, it has been around for a very long time, it has got vast scope, and therefore there is a lot of wealth hidden in that culture. By just being proud about it, we do not utilize it completely. If you extract the great and good elements from it and try to make use of it in our contemporary lives, doing that will be the best possible use that you can make of that culture. And moreover, I can say that not doing so may be a disservice we are doing to our own culture. Therefore, it is incumbent upon us to try to work in this area. And therefore, and the audience that I have gathered here today, the cream of the intellectual who's who kind of people from Hyderabad, they are best suited to contribute to this. And in cognizance of the importance of the theme, on behalf of Samskruti Foundation, we have been making appeals to you in all the programs hitherto, and that's why I am repeating it, because we think that unless it is contributed to by all of us, the work will not proceed the way we want it to. Since there is no precedence of important work, and therefore there are no proper examples, guiding examples which we can emulate, and therefore we have to maybe make some initial efforts on our own. So therefore we can add to the process of experimenting with this idea. But to make the path a little more clear, we have also with us one of our public policy professionals, Sri Siddharth Ayangari, who later in this program will initiate this topic, and probably maybe that will clarify the path for us a little more. So he will talk more on this. In today's talk, we have Shri Shankara Bharadwaj ji, who is a young scholar, but he has contributed a lot for his age. I think he has contributed immensely to original thought on the theme, that is this, how would a Hindu Rashtra, Dharma Rajya would look like. Now this theme is dear to our hearts, close to our hearts, and also it also has the potential to generate a lot many questions and themes that connect to public policy and culture, and therefore it is one of the extremely important sessions that we are going to have, and I thank him for having consented to come here and share his vision on this. So I will not take any more of your time, but with an appeal for all of you to contemplate on ways in which you can add to this task of connecting Samskruti to public policy, because that is the way we can keep it alive and actually reap benefits from it, rather than just feeling proud of it. So with these few words, I once again thank all of you for coming here, and hope that you will enjoy this session and very vigorously participate in the discussions, thought sharing, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for setting the context beautifully. Understood the prominence or the importance of Samskruti Adhyayana Kendra in taking the Indian heritage and culture forward, which are to be given to the future generations without any hesitation. the ancient now it's time to have a talk. Nahi gnanena sadrusyam pavitramih vidyate. So there is nothing in this world more purifying than the true knowledge. It is my proud privilege to introduce the today's distinguished speaker, Sri Shankara Bharadwaj Khandavalli. He is a Bangalore-based software professional, independent scholar of Indian knowledge system, editor and the director of Hindupedia, and a member of Samvit Kendra for Integral Research. For over 2 decades, he has been engaged in the study of Sanatana Dharma, Rajya Dharma, Indian knowledge systems, and the Bharatiya civilization thought. A respected speaker on Dharma Rajya, systemic approaches to the governance, and Indic knowledge traditions. He has delivered acclaimed talks on the renowned national platforms, including Sangam Talks and Indica. Today's thought-provoking topic is how would a Hindu Rashtra, Dharma Rajya look like? Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a warm Samskruti welcome to Sri Shankara Bharadwaj Khandavalli.
Sabhaya Namaha, Sabhapataya Namaha. I'm very happy and privileged to be here. This is a subject I have been working on for the last few years, and hopefully there are some worthwhile thoughts I can share today. So firstly, why we think this topic is practical to discuss, even while it may be important, requires some backdrop to be explained. One is the global backdrop, how the Eastern powers, the big powers, have decolonized in the 20th century, and how a lot of them are gaining power, establishing themselves as world powers in the 21st century. This leads to a natural progression where all of them start craving their own independent assertion, not just of their identity, but also their ways of life, their own models of running themselves, governing themselves, and teaching the world their values, spreading their culture. So this is one thread of thought that we will need to keep in mind. While we understand that in the mid 20th century, a lot of these countries have also accepted the prevalent dominant Western models as each nation suited itself, primarily out of survival fitness rather than any other considerations. And then another thread we will need to understand is how the West has progressed itself, how the Enlightenment ideals are faring in guiding ideal statecraft and creating ideal governing systems, and how their limitations are now coming to the forefront. The conversations are ripe even in the West. They are already talking of how these values are insufficient. There is enough criticism of how there is a bipartite worldview, there is hypocrisy in the way the Western countries are looking at the world. And then there are conversations about second enlightenment already to address those limitations. So there is an understanding that while the Enlightenment ideals look very universal on the face of it, individual liberty, representative government, all these things, that is also one thread that is progressing, although we in India are not very much exposed to it. And then the other thing that is probably more well known is the challenges that most of the open societies are facing because of the closed worldviews. Then the limitations that the nation state as a concept itself is facing, not just here but worldwide. So this gives us a very fertile ground to initiate a conversation on the fundamentals, the ideals based on which we can create collective systems. This is the external backdrop. Then there is an internal backdrop, specifically about Bharata. As we know, we are undergoing a protracted self-rediscovery, slow but definitely progressing. But we definitely know that the governing system we currently have is more a legacy of the imperial system than a legacy of our own heritage of the Chakravartis. And we also know there is no great alignment between the civilization that we have and the state that we have. So the geocultural or the ecosystem of our traditions, none of these find a lot of mention in our official systems. For instance, there are terminology like caste, all this, but we don't find desha anywhere, we don't find sampradaya anywhere. So without being aware of how this society is, how are we going to be able to create an ideal governing system for this nation? So largely the colonial views of India continue to dominate the way the present state craft runs, which includes categorizing society, creating its own social ladder, and then largely adopting a monotheistic view of religion, which is visible in the terminology, exclusivist terminology like denominations. While temporarily we have adopted an interpretative way, let us say we can read denomination as a sampradaya, which is not exactly the case, but we can make do with it as a makeshift arrangement. So while the nation largely has been electorally asserting its will, the intent of that will has just not been translating into the ideal governing system for this nation. So that again brings us to appreciating that we do have very fertile grounds for a new conception of state itself, not just here, but the fact that we will be able to realize something here will set a precedent for how the world can envisage new governing systems. So with this backdrop, we thought it's a more than working bottom up, we should ideally start envisaging how the future would look like than look at present day's problems. Primarily because every day we have been progressing, every single day we are talking of the present's problem. We are almost always talking about the past. To be able to even give a good shape to the present day's problems, we will need to situate them in the future and then project ourselves from present to there. So largely this is how we can have this conversation today. We can quickly see what a contrast looks like between the present systems and a dharmic collective. And then we can discuss more about how an ideal dharmic collective looks like and approaches that we have, alternatives, how we can actually go about it, realizing it. And finally, something more concrete that we can talk from today. So given the vastness of the subject and the vagueness of many problem spaces in this, first thing we thought was we will require a theoretical frame to structure our thought. Then we can have a systematic discourse. So for that, one thought process we had was the four level view. So again, this is nothing new, but we picked it from the Shruti, from the Purusha Sukta itself. Padosya Vishwa Bhutani Tripadasya Amritam Divi. So the manifest fourth leg is what we all get to see, but the three that are creating and governing it are both invisible and immortal. The details or the explanation of this, we will get a hint in the Purusha Sukta itself again. Dhata Prastad Yamada Jahara Sakra Pravidwan Parishacharasra. So it's a small story where Indra goes and learns what these four levels are from the Dhata or Prajapati, and that story is there in the Chandogya. And the corresponding consciousness layers of these four parts of the Purusha is found in the Mandukya, the Sthula, Sukshma, Karana, Turiya, which are broadly the gross, subtle, causal, and the fourth or the eternal. And if these four are how the Jiva is and the cosmos itself is, obviously all systems would be having all these four levels. So in that sense, most of what we talk in the discourse today, the instruments that we have, the policies, laws, and the activism around those, is only the manifest fourth leg. And this is the effect, and dealing with the effect is not going to help us fix the cause. So in that sense, we will have to actually start from the primal cause. The cause that is resulting in what we see as laws and policies is the architecture of the state. And the architecture of the state is the subtle layer. It is creating the institutions which are channeling our collective energies towards ideal outcomes or desirable outcomes. And the institutions itself is an effect of a doctrine to realize which the institution is being carved out. This again, now in most of the modern systems, the doctrine is the starting point, as is the case with our constitution and with most of the modern constitutions. The problem is, if doctrine is axiomatic, it is unchangeable. So to be able to move from one paradigm to a new set of ideals, we will have to overthrow it most of the times through a violent revolution, which has been the case with the progression in the West. And this happens because doctrine is axiomatic, but doctrine itself, if we see as an effect, it is coming from a certain worldview, how we understand the nature of man, nature of the world, purpose of life. To realize which, we will need certain systems whose ideals have to be derived based on this worldview. Now, most of the problems we face today are because the doctrine is nearly axiomatic in the Indian constitution, as is the case everywhere. And we are not very prone as a society towards violent revolutions and overthrows. So the solution to it we will discuss shortly, but this is how we will see. So the worldview, doctrine, architecture, then lived reality as a outcome of all these. In that sense, constitution itself cannot be a cause but an effect. From the collective will, based on a certain worldview, a constitution gets generated from time to time, which has been the case in the West, but it has been quite organic there. Now, most of us are aware of the three powers, the power of will, knowledge and action. So from our recent experiences, we can see that there is a lot of collective will getting manifested either electorally or in other means. And there is also a lot of power of action. So this is both my premise and the conclusion that we are going to lead to, is the power of action is there, but the power of knowledge is what is missing for us, which is where most of our collective efforts need to be going in. So I would like to do a brief contrast between the constitution and Dharma Shastra. Not as much because this is unknown or it's quite popular knowledge, but still, just to be able to structure the discourse, maybe it deserves a thought. So, primarily as a document, constitution becomes the root for any state, but it brings a lot of assumptions from elsewhere, and which makes it the bigger challenge in societies where those concepts are not native. That's a fundamental epistemic problem. So, which is why we will need to understand why Smriti actually suited us for in the past as well as it may in the future. Because primarily it will have the ontological and prescriptive content both. It has a worldview, it derives a worldview, and then it prescribes a doctrine as well as a state architecture. In that sense, it is both refutable, we can change it based on a certain axiomatic system, and then it is modifiable. Whereas constitutions can be modified not on an epistemic basis, they can be modified based on collective will alone, and that makes it an epistemic challenge for long running systems. So, a Dharma Shastra usually has, since Dharma has 3 layers, Dharma Shastra also will have those 3 layers, the Sanatana, Yuga, Deshakala. So, what is time space specific and what is temporal will have a lot more flexibility, whereas what is eternal is mostly refutable based on certain axiomatic base, which in our case is the Shruti. So, constitution on the other hand does not assume or take into cognizance anything that is permanent. It does take cognizance of what is uncompromised, which we see in the form of the basic structure. But there is no assumption that there can be something permanent at all, now, which again suits the way the Western civilization progresses, because every new system requires an overthrow of the old system. But the civilizations where we understand that there are the seeds that have to continue into eternity, this just doesn't work. But yes, it does have temporal content and it can be evolving. Coming to applicability, the Dharma Shastra first spells out the nature of man and nature of the world, and then it spells out the land where the law applies, which becomes the land of the law. Then there is a law of the land, which is derived as, whereas once constitution is confined to a nation state, we know the land of the law of the land is the scope of it. So again, because of this, there is an orthogonality, natural orthogonality of the institutions of the nation and the state that the Dharma Shastra understands, which is not understood by the nation state. So the constitution always assumes there is a nation state, where the geopolitical subsumes the geoculture. So the goals of the constitutions are very clear. The protection of rights, so there is a rights framework, which again derives based on a certain worldview. So the protection of those rights becomes an obligation of the state. And then execution of its own duties, the deliverance of the duties of the state. Whereas once we start with man instead of the state, we know there is a fulfillment, there is a purpose of life to fulfill which we will need to create all these institutions. So that becomes the primary goal. As a social model, this is perhaps not as discussed, but will require a lot more theorization for us, especially for Bharata, because we are not an organized society in the sense in which the West is. So we are largely an inherited society, and we have a very elaborate complex matrix of institutions, which again we will discuss shortly. And how does this matter for us to be able to carve out a state? So this, for instance, tells us very clearly where the challenge starts coming once we start problematizing the statecraft. So on the right is very simple how a modern nation state would look like. There is no, the geocultural is always aligned with the geopolitical. There is no challenge there, one nation, one culture, one language, it's all good. But that's not exactly how we are. So we do have an orthogonality between the cultural geography and the political geography, because the latter is temporal and the cultural geography is permanent for us. The deshas are not changing. So whatever deshas were there would be there today, because that is what defines the cultural subunit. So the political geography is carved out taking cognizance of the cultural geography and then carving out political and administrative units to be able to align with that cultural geography. So that's one of the biggest design problems that we will have when we start embarking upon how we can envisage a state for this nation. So what do we need to then understand about this dharmic collective so that we can have a more meaningful conversation about carving a state for this collective? One is the four-level view. Once we appreciate the four-level view, then how do we have systems for this based on this? So like we discussed, the four levels are there: the gross, subtle, causal and absolute. Now when we apply it to the system design as a lived reality, we have the experience of a working system, so we only see the outcomes, and then there is a feedback loop which feeds into the system. The subtle layer or the layer of the institutions is where we have the institution architecture. Then we have the incentive system, which is channelizing our collective energies. For this, the text level would be prescriptive. Largely, if we have to look at a text, the state architecture is there in the constitution. In the traditional text, it would be found more in the Arthashastra. And then going further above to the cause of it, the doctrine is what we would find in the Dharma Shastra, from which it derives a state architecture. And the policy is what we find in the Niti. So we will have the Dharma, Artha and Niti. So the Dharma Shastra, correspondingly, in the modern constitutions, we just don't find that element at all, because that is the ontological content. The normative and the prescriptive is what we largely find in modern constitutions. So this, for a quick summary, the Shruti and Dharma Shastras is where the ontological content is. The doctrinal content is found in the Dharma Shastra and in an axiomatic way in the Arthashastra to be able to derive it further. And then the illustrated Dharma Shastras, which are the Itihasa and Purana. The architecture is where is what we find in the Arthashastra, briefly in Niti. Then the illustrated Niti, like Panchatantra. And its manifestation would be an ideal free society. So to take a brief example of how this continuity manifests in the texts, from the Shruti we can take the popular or the most celebrated example of the Vishnu Suktam, where it is said that Trini pada vichakrame Vishnur Gopa adabhya tato dharmani dharayan. So in 3 steps he has scaled the 3 worlds. He is protecting those worlds, he is the Gopa. and then he is upholding the dharma in all these. So, establishing and upholding. So, if we see in the Raja Dharma, we will see mostly a counterpart of this as the responsibility of the Samrat or the nature of the Samrat. Raja is the Palaka and he has to protect the Dharma. Is it not common sense? Yes, in a way. But then the fact that we have an epistemic basis from an axiomatic text, which we are deriving into a seed text for statecraft, makes it possible for us to structure the discourse, make the content refutable, evolve it, and make progress. It doesn't have to be imposed as a collective will or wish of some leadership. So then again, further down in from the Dharma Shastras, we will see how in Ardha Shastra it is told more in a teleological way. We will have to avoid the Matsnyaya, so we will have to establish a righteous rule. Whereas in Niti, it is more given as a metric of success of the ruler. The ruler who is doing all this is a successful ruler. So, from the ontological, it has become teleological, it has become normative, then it has become prescriptive. There is a flow of the nature of the content itself. The other side of the Dharmic collective is how we understand our knowledge and then how we understand our society, which are reflections of each other. We can see them as the koshas or the sheaths, concentric sheaths. In the innermost comes the orthopraxy, the most rigorous formal knowledge and formal structures. The Shruti, the debating traditions, all these things. And then as we go out, we will see less formal structures and knowledge getting more syncretic and more practitioner oriented. It doesn't mean that the inner sheaths are lacking in practice or realization. There they coincide. Where there is practice, there is realization, there is also the understanding of the theory. They are inseparable in the innermost sheath. But as we go out, the theoretical rigor diminishes. So, we will find more semi-formal and then informal content. So, as we go out, we will have the outer core of the Agama, then the Pauranika, then the Sthalakula Puranas, then the Janapada. There is a continuity, and a very similar continuity is what we will see in our society also. From the most formal, urban, then the semi-urban, rural, and then the forest. Every terrain is seen as part of the civilizational whole. The advantage that comes is not only there is continuity, but there is nothing that we are judgmental about or putting outside a system. There is no definition of what is inside and what is outside. The common sense assumption is that everything is inside, which is in a very stark contrast from the modern urban worldview, where there is an inside, there is an outside. Then there is an attempt to accommodate what is outside, which is already putting a judgment on how the inside should look like, which creates problems in statecraft because state cannot afford to do this. By doing this, state is not only discriminating what is not inside, but it is then creating formal structures for resource access. It is for creating formal structures around expectations of lifestyles also, which is what we see happening from the British times and affecting us more today. So, most of these problems do not exist or did not exist in a Dharmic collective because we did not take that judgmental view of civilization, and we had this continuity. So, what are the implications and why would we want to adopt a 4-level view? If we understand the architecture of texts, then we have a systematic macro view of how to understand our collective. And that enables us to design our collective systems. And we can strategize the formation of those systems rather than working from the present systems to suit ourselves. So, as on date, we see inconsistencies not just in the society but in the system also. But we don't see harmony. Harmony, if is there in our vision, then our efforts will be to realize it. That is why we will need to first envisage what we would require as a dharmic collective, and then we start working towards it. And which is why the four-level view is important. Unless we posit our and articulate our worldview in a way that it can translate into formal systems, we cannot create our own systems. Because we will have to face tremendous rigorous formal discourse, whether it is to counter the enlightenment ideals, whether it is to counter the present knowledge about the rights framework, or just pick any problem space, it is enough rigorous knowledge that we will have to engage with. And that is possible only if we are able to articulate at the most abstract level our knowledge in a way that we can start engaging with the world. And then obviously we will be able to do any validation of the current systems or policies or laws as a feedback loop, if only we can set our expectations and then carve out, derive metrics from there based on which we can validate all these things. Which obviously is not the case today. To be fair, 1947, whatever be the situation, we did adopt a model, and the intent was probably to ensure we suit ourselves as a nation. But then most of the ideals like pluralism, as they got ingested into the alien system which was foisted on us, most of them got digested to give the exact opposite results. Neither pluralism nor tolerance actually gave us ideal results. It resulted in either underprivileging or conflict. That is because the frame was never rethought. So, and we cannot rethink the frame unless we have a proper epistemic basis for it, which is the reason we are coming from the ontological. So, if we are able to then conceive from the ontological, then we lay out our doctrinal layer, we will be able to create systems that suit not just us, but meet most of the demands of the world as on date. Let us say, for instance, if we appreciate the principle of harmonious complementarity as a principle of collective being, that is the nature of the cosmic being as we understand. It is very clear for us, we do not have any conflict in mind. All the duals in the world, the Ishvara, Maya, Prakasha, Vimarsha, all these Shiva, Shakti, Purusha, Prakriti, all of them are harmonious, inseparable, complementary duals. In a bipartite worldview, on the other hand, we will have the conflicting duals. They are complementary but still conflicting. The believer, non-believer, insider, outsider, right? Even the left and right for that matter, secular, theocratic. Most of those duals are conflicting, but they will require to coexist in an eternally conflicting way, which means that the institutions we design will inherently have conflict. They are built with conflict as a worldview, which is playing out in most of what we are seeing today. So, unless we understand or appreciate that there has to be a formal articulation of these principles like complementarity, like causation, in the way we understand our collective being, we will not be able to bring them into a working system. So, at this point, this is the kind of work we have embarked upon. One is the architecture of the Shastras, how it looks like, and then the building blocks for this, how to interpret the text and how to separate out layers in the text. So, at this point, I would pause. Probably we can have some conversation and then proceed to the next section. There are any comments or disagreements also, I welcome them.
अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुर्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. Deep salutations to Guru Dakshinamurti. On this occasion, it's a great privilege to introduce father of Khandavalli, Shankara Bharadwaj. He is Sri Khandavalli Satyavara Prasad. He is available here. So thank you for your presence, sir. He is the retired bank officer. He is a retired bank officer, author, independent thinker. So thank you very much for your gracious presence here, sir. Yes, please.
Are you open to questions now? Or
Yes, sir.
Yes,
You
absolutely,
can take
sir.
them, and then it's better to discuss now before going to the next section. So please.
Good evening, Sabhai Namaha. So it's great to be here. My name is Dr. Suri. I presently am a Veena player and an astrologist. I'm doing my PhD in astrology. I retired from Oracle Corporation some 10 years ago. So this is a fantastic way of presenting at an architecture level of our understanding of dharma and versus the present system. You're slotting them into various areas. Now, what I see is that those days, earlier days when our Raj Dharma was there, the intellectual thought was separate. And Raja was depending on the intellectual thought coming from the Dharma Shastras or whatever, whoever is practicing, or the Panditas or whoever. So he used to lean on them for Dharma Shastras, and then he has the Raja Dharma of Paripalana, of good governance, and then it is coming top down. Right? Now, contrast to this, the present day, it is bottom up, majoritarianism, the democracy, right? Now, with the majoritarianism, the intellectual part is lacking, right? Now, who will provide that kind of intellectual? See, today you have somebody who has some understanding of intellectual thought process that he inherited because he did what all, services he did some 15, 20, 30 years ago when he roamed around all the India. He has understood that. But next crop of people whom we are, or the leadership that is coming up doesn't have that intellectual capability. So how do we get that? Because today if we talk about Smriti, if we talk about Manusmriti especially, and you know what is going to happen, right? So how do we get to that part where the political system need to be infested with intellectual dharma? So that is probably the real issue, because today the political crop that is coming out doesn't have, I'm sorry to say, doesn't have that intellectual level of understanding or even, want to understand. It's very mass driven. So bottom up versus top down is the issue. And the top down is interested in the dharma. Here the bottom up is not interested in dharma, or at least it seems so. So how do we match this, or how do we go about it? Maybe that's the question you're trying to answer. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. So this again, we will need to probably formulate this. There are multiple components in this. So in itself, the universal adult franchise or the electoral democracy is one manifest outcome, but Essentially, what happened with the Protestant Reformation is the replacement of divine will with public will in the Western systems. Which again, if we look at our systems, there is never this kind of conflicting duels. Both the divine and the public will are manifest in the head of the state. Because there is legitimacy and credibility, nobody without Janadharana can be the head of the state. It may not be through universal adult franchise or whatever. Instruments differ, but then the democratic ideal that the Janadharana is required for the legitimacy of the head of the state is a very clearly known principle in tradition. The problem is the divine will getting invalidated, and that has its own causation in the West, but we don't have to suffer that handicap. So again, it comes back to, we can definitely have a holistic design, state architecture, where both divine and public will can harmoniously exist, get manifested in the head of the state through proper instruments. Lot of homework, but then we'll have to formulate it this way so that it becomes solvable. We can neither invalidate the public will, nor can we invalidate the divine will. So again, in the same context, probably a small detour, why the separation of powers has happened in the modern state is also to do with the similar reasons, right? Essentially, they had to protect rights, so there is a rights framework. But do we have better alternatives to right framework? Now, essentially, it's not about whether rights are the ideal way to go about, but the main question is there any other instrument which can confine the otherwise infinite power of the state, which we just don't have today? So, if by design, if the state is finite in its powers, then we may not require a rights framework, but that's not exactly how we are today. We have a continuously expanding state which has to protect individual rights. And the more the state has to protect every individual, the more the state has to become more powerful. So it's a problem that cannot be solved by stating it in this frame. We will have to move to a paradigm where the epistemics change, and then we frame the questions as in a way, or frame the questions in a way that they become answerable. Does that answer the question? I mean, if you're not convinced, you can talk further. Okay.
Is it possible to give a diagrammatic structure for the architecture?
It is.
I think it can be given a diagrammatic structure for the architecture.
So we do have, in fact, we were about to discuss that. Now that you asked, this is how our collective institutions can be seen. So there is a micro, there is a macro, and at the macro is what we see the causation theories, the pantheism, the Vishwarupa, then the Triguna, Varna, all these things.
After your question, I'll take mic.
So in the left is the time function, which is the sampradayas,
It was
the Guru Sishya lineages, all those.
constant.
The right is what we see the
Please ask.
social collectives, the Desha, Kula, all these. In the middle is the hierarchical power structure, which is the Rajya or the state. So there is an orthogonality, three-way orthogonality between the time function, the power function, and the social institutions.
We have core values for the constitution.
Yes.
We define frameworks in different domains. Under the core values, a system or a subsystem of functions, which can be put into practice by governance through a governance structure in different domains. And the core values, actually what the land has been believing for ages, have come into the definition of the core values behind the constitution. That's where is the connect, as to my understanding. I'm sorry, I have my limitation in understanding. So that's the connect between the dharma, what the land has been believing in and coming in the form of core values, and the structure that is made to satisfy that. And within the, for any subsystem of the governance, it can form its own rules and regulations so that there is no clash with the core values. This is what my understanding is. And in this context, what I would like to know is it something we have missed in the process due to the Western influences? Is what, if it can be shared, and it will help us a lot.
I think so, sir. So the state doctrine.
No, do you agree with my understanding of the current situation, current structure, and the framework of working?
In a way, yes, that was the attempt.
Yeah, please modify it, correct it if it is.
That was the attempt. That part I agree. I mean, the attempt was to ensure the core values enter our system. Did it succeed? No, because the frame actually digested those values to give opposite results. And that's where the problem is. So the Enlightenment ideal and the Western universalism largely inspires the constitution, and that is where our conflict of values is. And to change that, we cannot do much within the current frame, because as we discussed, most of the modern systems, including our present system, the doctrine is axiomatic. Changing the doctrine means an overthrow of the system, and that's where we will need an architectural approach.
Dr. Suri had hit the bullseye perfectly when he posed a question that the intellectual process of advisory role of a guru or intellectual class that would advise the king to act or not to act in a particular manner was there in the earlier days. After the medieval era, two or more than among very few bad things that we have imported to this country is democracy and limited liability concept. Democracy, we call it, or demagoguery. Is it democracy or demagoguery? We don't know. We are presuming that it is a democracy, but it is not a democracy. And limited liability concept is one thing that has crept into Indian concept, Indian governance and Indian ecosystem, legal system, where in our dharma, father's liability has to be paid by children because Atma Putra Rupaya. That used to be the concept. Today, everybody knocks away bank's money. These are the days today. Now when we go into the dharma and nyaya, there are two different aspects of it. Narrow term for dharma is nyaya. Whether there is an adjudicatory system or no adjudicatory system, nyaya has to be, dharma will be there. Because that is inbuilt in every person by virtue of our culture, by virtue of our education. But when it comes to nyaya is man-made. Nyaya, when it comes to nyaya, two things arising out of democracy. That is, when rule is powerful, it will kill the king. When the king is powerful, he will kill the rule. Two things will go together. How do we try to get a balance between these two? And I would like to have a broader view from your side as to how we can bring a balance between the present day democracy and Dharma Rajya, which you are canvassing, would be in a position to slowly slowly change the system, present day system, into a Dharma Rajya. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I will
Over to you.
do this in two parts, sir. One, obviously, I think the common point being the ruler having a intellectual advice. From a systemic view, I would state it slightly differently. I mean, while agreeing fully with it, is the system that the West has. It evolved with a fear and respect for Rajaguna, and its inherent lack of understanding of the Trigunas. So it had no good mechanisms to tame the excess of Rajaguna, which results in cruelty, ruthlessness, all these things, oppression also. So that is what we will see in the separation of powers and subordination also, the way the executive and military are subordinated to softer functions, which in the Dharmic state, we have very good mechanisms to subordinate Rajaguna because we have systematized Sattva-guna, which is simply absent in the modern systems. There is a hunch of understanding that there is something called high civilization, soft functions, which need to be protected, which couldn't yet be systematized by the West. So that's one part of the answer. Unless we understand that it is the Sattva-guna which can actually tame and control the Rajaguna, we cannot create those institutions which are both holistic and harmonious, which don't then suffer the problem that we have today. The second part is, yes, but I would like to slightly layer this question of democracy, because the democratic ideal where the Janadharana or the public will has to be manifest, we will need to distinguish it from the instruments to realize the democratic ideal, which could be the universal adult franchise or the electoral democracy, all these things. And then we can make a proper systematized critique of why the electoral democracy is not fulfilling the purpose of realizing the democratic ideal in our collectivities. That's my thought.
Our speaker, am I audible? Our speaker pointed one aspect, that is digestion of many of our institutions and all that. I want to add a couple of points on that. There is a very big and very old mechanism of digestion going on in our country. I'll point out only 2-3 points. For instance, our university system itself is a clone of Protestant German university system. Our very capitalism, as many of you might have heard about Bishop Weber's book, Capitalism and Protestant Values. So our very capitalism system itself is a Western import, Christian import, for that matter, Protestant Christian import. And our secularism is a Protestant concept. And for substantiation of this point, one may go through Sai Deepak's books. He convincingly demonstrated that our present so-called secularism is a Protestant concept. So I'll end this like this. There are many institutions on which our present day so-called modern lives are going on. So unless we understand them to the core and overturn them and make them Swadeshi, unless we arrest this question, the process of digestion and reverse it, this kind of Dharma Rajya and our attempt to establish or re-establish Dharma Rajya will find insurmountable difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Pardon me for pausing the question and answers. So we are in the mid of speech. I request our speaker Mr. Shankara Bharadwaj to continue the speech.
Going further, we thought there could be two approaches in going about how we can realize a Dharmic collective. One is the system reform. We have a system, we will work through it, we will try to subvert it, insert our values, and then eventually take over. It will have its own advantages and disadvantages. So, but then the fundamentals will be there. The doctrine of the state will remain for a good part. It will be unchangeable in the near foreseeable future, and then we will have to use interpretative ways to read the existing ideals in our own light. So, it's being tried, it's not unknown, but then that's one method or approach. And then work through the system until there is enough consensus that we can build to fundamentally replace or transform it. The second approach is system design. We go back to the drawing board. You actually articulate and envisage how we want our future to be. And then we start putting elements, the theoretical elements, create the discourse. And then we go to the point where we can transform the current system by generating consensus. How these two differ? One is in good problem solving, right? I mean, it's usually said you state the problem without assuming too much about the constraints. Articulating the problem in a way we assume the present constraints itself is a hindrance for us to stating it the right way. While solving the problem, we apply the constraint, not while formulating it or envisaging the future that we want. So, in that sense, I have always leaned towards the latter so that we can synthesize and generate the knowledge required. This is how the system reform looks like. It's probably something that already some people are working on. So, we will need to change it. We will need to understand how to interpret all the existing principles of the Constitution. What does fraternity mean? What does equality mean? What do the liberties really mean? And then, in the light of how a Dharma collective looks like, try to reinterpret all the modern values so that through a intensive judicial activism and other means, we will start forcing the system to see the meaning that we want in the terms that it has stated. For instance, recently it has happened, which is denomination. Now we know the problem that we have with denominations. But in the Hindu constitution, there is a term sampradaya used for denomination. So they said you can't apply a term that doesn't apply to the country and then give judgments in that light. So you will have to interpret it in a way that it applies to this collectivity, which we have as sampradayas. So you have to treat sampradayas as denomination when you are passing judgments. And this was the argument made in the Supreme Court. It worked for to some extent. Obviously, it will have limitations because denominations comes from a exclusivist view. So it is not understood that the natural organic overlaps that we have in sampradaya ecosystem would be seen. So there will be limitations, but then there are ways by which we can actually start making changes to the system through rigorous judicial activism. In that light, once the interpretations change, then the laws eventually get changed. When they are reading it in a different light, why do they have that terminology? So eventually the legislative will have pressure to change. Then that will result in institutions start changing their own mindset. It's a long process, but then it happens whenever it happens, which again further then leads to economic, educational and all other. So in every sphere this kind of activism can happen. This is how system reform looks like, but essentially we assume that there is a form and then we will need to change it. If on the other hand we want to do a system architecture, we understand that the present systems are essentially inspired by a different worldview. We also understand that the systems governed with our worldview are not in currency, and the present and the future challenges are such that we don't have any ready-made solution. We will have to design our systems. So we will write afresh a foundational document positing the challenges that we face for the future. So we will make changes to the current structure. It's still interim measures will be there, but every step we take will be with that vision in mind. So we will prepare for a fundamental change while preparing the knowledge base, creating the discourse in that direction. So we envisage a spirit that is eternal and can work through all the forms, which makes it organic for us to interpret all the existing forms, even the alien forms, in that spirit and then transform them. So this is how the second approach looks like. And these are the differences. Whatever be the approach, we will have to get our people into positions. Policy design may be visibly similar, but institution design will fundamentally be different, because if we are adopting a dharmic worldview, the entire institutional architecture will be holistic. It will not be reductionist, it will not be based on the separation of powers, it will not be based on individual rights. So institution design will be fundamentally different. State design will be different. And then the theoretical frameworks will be there. We will have epistemic frames to debate the frameworks. So it will be more meta conversations about what kinds of frames really suit us. And then worldviews is where most of the difference is. And this is not a place where we will have to convince anybody why our worldview is superior. Each society is entitled to its own worldview. The question is, how exactly is our worldview getting realized in our institutions? So again, our premise that we started with, the grounds are fertile for a change. It's not that while all the populist problems are there, the requirements are also huge. This is not a society that can progress much with the present hindrances, the systemic obstacles. But we have not brought into the discourse what is the nature of what is to be in the future. And that is, once that starts happening, there will be a fundamental change in the discourse. And that's exactly how the recent successes have been. Whether it was the recent electoral success or before that the Ayodhya movement, it was the Dharma Rajya slogan or the dream that mobilized the country. And then obviously capturing the discourse not just towards goodness, but towards aspiration, a futuristic aspiration. It was again the aspirational discourse that brought major changes even in the recent decades. And political correctness, the preemption of discourse out of compulsions is something that it's high time it changes. It is fine, political compulsions are understood, political correctness is not necessary. There is a line between them. For instance, it is fine to say today we require this. It's absolutely not needed to say we can't have alternatives. So there has to be a positive set of aspirations, and then feasibility, and why can this even not happen is the kind of positive discourse that we will need to create about what we are to realize. Again, the missing piece between the will and action, which is the power of knowledge, that I would like to re-emphasize. The generation of knowledge has died down because on whatever historic reasons. What is happening is, while there is the popular layer where there is dissemination happening, entire inner sheath of our knowledge traditions is in a preservation mode, and that is a known reality. How do we bring that out? How do we articulate, how do we get ourselves to be able to articulate things in a futuristic way? That requires realizing this as a living knowledge system and then revisiting its formal structures so that we will be able to articulate things, start the debates, refutations, bring them into active discourse. Some case studies that we can see where we can, while we have discussed the contrasts. So let's say rights framework is there. This is one of the biggest problem that we have today. Again, as we discussed, it's not easy to get away because there is no other viable instrument that can confine the power of the state. But then, if we take a step back, where does it even come from? So, man should have rights, they have to be protected by the state. And then, who is it protecting it from? Sometimes it is the state that is the biggest problem. It is from the state itself that the rights have to be protected, and then from the society. So, both are inimical entities from which the individual needs to be protected. So, there is a worldview based on which this flow is happening. In contrast, what is our ontology? If all beings crave happiness, if man's goals are about man's own fulfillment, and what is the state responsible for? It is responsible for enabling that fulfillment, where it has no active role but a passive role. What is it really protecting there? What kind of liberty is the state protecting? And why are there even boundaries to a liberty that somebody has to even protect it? So to take a small example, what I mean, we were recently in Rishikesh. I am a grahastha and I was hosted by a sannyasi. Now he is liable to give all his financial accounts, everything. Basically, the renunciate function is completely obliterated in the nation. There are renunciates, they survive, but then they can't properly fulfill their functions. Their liberty is not enabled at all because the system has a certain view towards what man's liberty is and what man should crave to aspire. So that once the goals of life itself are dictated by the state while claiming not to dictate, the liberties are automatically curtailed. So much so that we don't even imagine that something outside of these bounds can exist, and which is the real mental curtailment that we suffer. So protection of rights is in a way taking away a lot of imagination, your liberty, possibilities, immense possibilities of life. So from the theology, from the social theory, we are deriving a principle for state from which laws and policies are getting derived. We are not even aware where we are actually getting curtailed. Similarly, religion. Now, if monotheism and bipartite worldview are assumptions of the state, which is the case with the Indian state, this is not there everywhere. Now, if you take the ecosystem of sampradayas, they are not exclusivist. There is no exclusivism by membership. There is no right to propagate. It's an organic ecosystem where expansion happens by merit. But once you have a bipartite worldview, once you have monotheism, you will have a church-state separation. So there will be rights, religious rights that the state has to protect. Because church has to have its own power domain and the state has to have its own. This is another example. Similarly with jurisprudence, whatever sphere we take, we will keep seeing that contrast. Now, equality and justice, if the requirements they are to be realized by a judicial system, and it is known that there is a trade-off between equality and justice. But the goal of jurisprudence would be what? Protection of rights has to be there, curtailment of the state power so that it doesn't violate individual liberties. And then there should be penalty for deterrence and then for transformation. Whereas, if there is a natural order, if there is a cosmic order which is manifest in every individual as a natural order, we know there is a nature of man. Based on that, the duty of the state becomes protection of that order which is already known, which is what we know in the West also as natural justice. But then once an official system gets carved out, that's not exactly how it translates. And how does this make a difference to our life in the philosophy of justice? In the rationale for penalty itself. Why is penalty imposed? For deterrence or transformation. But in our case, there is something upstream which is parardha, to protect which a penalty is imposed. And everything downstream does change. The institutional structure changes once the goals change. Similarly with education, what we see is weaponizing of literacy, then there is a formalizing of education, and then there is urbanization, monotheism, mass production, universal consistency criteria, where there is no diversification of domains. So this is a chain that comes, which again, if our goals of life are seen differently, if happiness, civilizational, inward and fulfillment, skills for life are required, fine, but there is then fulfillment for which knowledge is sought, and then the one possessing the knowledge is not its owner. There is a natural diversification of knowledge, and the consistency becomes localized. That is why we have diversity of sampradayas. It doesn't have to be universal consistency criteria. Consistency is always localized. Completeness is attempted. And completeness is inconceivable in modern education because consistency is universalized. And universal consistency naturally leads to monotheism. You can't have alternate views. You either have a right theory or a wrong theory. But if it is right, it has to be universally valid and applicable and agreeable to everybody. Another example is town planning, where the objective in the modern system obviously is to ensure resources are managed for human consumption. There has to be fairness and distribution, efficient distribution of resources, with the ultimate goal of public welfare. In contrast, if society is a vehicle of divine, natural elements are divine, the human's approach to the elements is naturally in a way that the hygiene is there. I mean, it doesn't have to be a goal at all. Cleanliness is a manifestation of divinity. People would manage their collective spaces. Again, related to the diversification of knowledge also, the space separation is an inherent element in most of our designs, whether it is in knowledge sphere or in social sphere. Resource access and resource management mechanism, diversification happens naturally, which suffers once we do aggregation. And once there is aggregation and urbanization, there is a natural barrier on what is outside and resource access denial to segments that are outside what we define as the insider. So which basically means that we cannot have any space separation, which means there can't be diversity. All this flows, and which creates duress on the society. So I would like to pause here, have our conversation before we get to the final section.
Not doing a holistic exercise, we end up with divine or lower than that, we end up with such exercises. Otherwise, to me, both of them are divine. The upper paragraph as well as the lower paragraph.
Yes, sir, but this as an outcome, one of the outcomes is not the same as this being the axiomatic goal of the system. Once this becomes the main goal, it precludes the divinity element. And it also precludes the diversification in the name of efficiency.
So, under public welfare, everything will come when you do it, when you view it in a holistic way.
Yes.
So, therefore, both of them end up at the same thing. The way of practicing is the problem. So, we tend to do and bring in lots of ailments in the system while practicing it at a substandard manner rather than to go by a holistic way and bring in dharma. Am I right?
Yes, so that's again the difference. If we take take an interpretative approach, we can insert the elements of divine and then we can realize it.
Sorry, sir, I could not ask you the question earlier. You said that the Constitution Act stands today. You said, as you said, the Constitution as it stands today is not permanent.
Yes.
But Constitution as it stands today is permanent,
Okay.
and has a set of permanent values,
Okay.
which cannot be changed. That is the constitutional position as it stands today.
Yes.
Okay. Then the other thing was, you said that when the Constitution was formulated, it has not taken a sort of a dharmic view while framing the Constitution. That I think is the premise of your analysis.
No.
Am I right? No?
No.
So
But
or
please
otherwise,
complete your
alternatively,
point.
you mean to say the Constitution as it exists today has not is not taking the dharmic view as a basis of this, its own existence.
Yes.
What I beg to differ, maybe I am the only person who will be supporting Constitution here. The framers and the drafters of the Constitution, maybe they are not Vedic scholars, but they are eminent people civilizationally. I cannot say K.M. Munshi and people like that in the drafting committee are the people. Gopal Swami Iyengar, Allayad Krishna Swami, Madhav Rao, people like that are not risen from the civilization of the country. They are people who have understood the civilization of the country, and they have actively taken part in the Constitution. Here I have a major difference in your premise. Later on, there are certain structural things that are to be put in place, and they were all put in place. The later on difficulties which we have, basically a leftist takeover under Nehru, and the constitutional fundamental rights. I also beg to differ you on one thing, that the individual rights that are there in the Constitution may be somewhat a restriction on the dharmic side. I beg to differ that. As you are well aware, a citizen, even in the ancient times, has to protect himself from the bandits and also the servants of the king. I am quoting Chanukya here. So the having a formal constitutional right is a requirement at that time, while having a nation of this size, 33 crores even then. So basically what we are thinking today is we are ignoring the realities of that time. If you check the abolition of Jamindari Act in Bihar, when we became, and before Constitution just came into existence, and the abolition of Jamindari Act in the present day UP, you will understand how it can be done efficiently, how it can be botched up. So what I meant to say is that what we have today is the best thing we could have in given circumstances even today. The failure which we are facing is our ability to put our ideas in the as a pressure on the ruling. And many times, I am sorry to say that, very few people who are articulating these things are not having experience in real world ground politics. Our utopian ideas, again, I'm very sorry to say this, our utopian ideas are not practical.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Please complete.
Sir, understood, sir. No,
Please complete.
not like that. So, the context is very clearly understood by the speaker. Sir, context is very clearly understood by the speaker. Now, speaker will give the justification for this.
So this is precisely the reason why I put forth the 4-level view, because we cannot talk of ideals at the level of ideals and then contrast them. It is not debatable that the Indian Constitution is explicitly stated the Enlightenment ideal and Western universalism. It has nowhere stated Indian ideals at all. So that is there, the document is visible for us, and that is the 1950.
Lot of people are saying that we have democracy. As per the constitution, we don't have the democracy. What we have is what is called as the constitutional republic.
Correct.
Democracy means that the near absolute rule of the public. It is not there. What we have is the limitation of the both on the government, on the public, with fundamental rights and duties and all. So what
Correct.
we have is a democracy as long as it is permitted within the constitution. So what we have is a constitutional republic. So it is not democracy as
Democratically elected.
Please introduce yourselves.
We have what we have is a democratically elected constitutional republic. That's the specific term. But so to not get into all this is why I said we'll have to distinguish the democratic ideal and the instruments to realize it.
Okay. The democracy, what is their voting, this one structure, and all those things are again subject to the provisions of the constitution. We don't
Yes.
have a majority rule most of the time. People will get 30% also will become MP and MLA because of multi-party government.
Which is
This
fine.
is the process that is there. So what we have is a constitution.
True.
Fine.
But it is democratically elected. I think, it's commonly understood when people are saying democracy, but then, that's not the main debate. Coming back,
I'm very sorry to interrupt.
I would like
Mr.
to
Speaker.
respond before we can.
Yeah. So once it is completed, then we can go ahead with the next proceedings.
Yes. So, sir, primarily, we can read intent into what people have done, but that's not necessary when the document is there. The first draft of constitution that we have in 1950 has not taken cognizance of any of the native institutions. That's a fact. Now, what it has targeted is the problems it has stated as inherited from the British Indian state. Whether it is the feudalism, whether it is the social problems, all the problem spaces that the Indian Republic in 1947 tried to address were the problem spaces as inherited. It has not stated any fresh problem at all. The only challenge it had was integration, which is where all the principalities, all that there. And actually, I did a 5-part talk on this systemic cause of the social problems in India, and then we are it's published on Bharat. I can give you the links. But coming back, at the level of the ideals, if we can't state things correctly, what I stated was any of our good intent about having a dharmic value in the present system will get digested to give the negative results because the frame is alien. I never said there was no intent to do the right thing. There was the intent. But then it doesn't matter what the intent is, the outcome is like this because we have a certain frame and that frame is largely inherited. So we will have to state the problems more precisely and then we can solve them. That's the spirit of what I am trying to say. And even before all this, I have actually explicitly said that out of survival fitness needs or whatever it is, we have adopted these models, Western models, as a necessity. That wasn't complaint at all. We take cognizance of the reality as it is, and then we will figure out what we can do as we go forward.
So don't think otherwise because of the shortage of time. So we request the speaker to precise the next speech. We would like to incorporate one more speech into this theme. So, sir, how much time you would like to take for that?
10 minutes.
10 more minutes? Yes. Thank you, sir.
So the final section that I had in mind was, given all this, what is it that we can state as meaningful set of goals for, let us say, 2047 or a reasonable time frame that makes us or puts us in a position where we can mobilize discourse in the right direction towards that. So how can, so this is one wish statement, so, but then we will trying to realize what a Dharmic collective can look like. So we want a Bharat of future, let us say by 2047 or maybe 74, whenever it happens. It has to be beyond the known norm of what a superpower is today. It can't be just materially superpower. And then which is an abode of knowledge, aesthetics, spirituality, happiness, prosperity and power. Essentially, that what people try to realize for us, our rishis. Where every being is enabled for highest knowledge and highest happiness. Where people live harmoniously, non-acrimoniously and contribute to each other's well-being. In which Dharmikas are primary citizens, but we accommodate everybody else. Where man does not need to run helter-skelter for justice, there is timely justice. Where crime is minimal, innocent are fearless in their public expression, while being accountable on their expression. Where people pursue their highest fulfillment according to their own traditions, without fear of judgment. Where there is no shortage of resources or avenue towards pursuing highest fulfillment. Where human is measured by character and knowledge, not merely money and power. Where public spaces are clean, sacred, beautiful, worth craving to live in. Where there is fair taxation. Where wealth generation is possible without fiscal or character corruption. Where the state protects the wealth generator and the wealth generator funds security rather than state owning security. Then the wealth generator invests in righteous activities where all occupations are of divinity and dignity and people have the freedom to pursue them based on their own ability and inclination, ruchi adhikara. Where each individual, group and tradition has the space and liberty to practice and propagate by merit, not necessarily by right. Where officers officiate and do not pretend to serve, to provide ideal governance. Where warriors are proud of protecting the land, not just the land and people, but also the ways of life. And realize their own highest ideals, like the ace warriors like Rama and Arjuna. Where protection of geopolitical boundary is not an underdog's achievement, but the assurance of a world power. Where the Bharata, the Rajya, is seen as the protector of Dharma. So now how we go about it, again we can go into it, but essentially if we are able to articulate our collective will in terms that are meaningful, non-controversial and something that gives very clear direction to the state system so that it can take these as goals, and then it is very easy to say that this is the direction in which each of the institution has to transform itself. So with this I would like to end.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. So yes, sir. As I mentioned, so definitely, so during the moderation I would like to provide the ample time for the people to ask the questions, multiple questions. So only one submission. My request is, please allow me to incorporate one more small speech. Once it is completed, then the question and answer session will be given. I request, thank you sir, thank you very much. I'll call you once again onto the dais. Public policy which shapes and safeguard the culture by promoting, preserving the societal values and heritage into the governance and development. Acharya Kautilya said very clearly in Ardhasastra, Praja Sukhe Sukham Ragnaha, Prajanam cha hite hitam, Natma Priyam hitam Ragna, Prajanam tu Priyam hitam. The welfare of the country and administrators are depending on the welfare of the public. The objective of the government should be always the public welfare. So, in this context, I request Mr. Siddharth Ayyagari to deliver on the theme Public Policy Connection to Culture. Welcome, Mr. Siddharth Ayyagari, to deliver it on the specific theme.
Sabhaya Namaha. Good evening, everyone. I won't be talking about the public policy theme, just it's a basic introduction to what the Samskruti Talks mean and the core intention of these talks. So it has been so far 18 such public Samskruti Talks have happened on various themes like public health, Kaumara, Bharata, so like on pediatrics, environment control, water conservation from the perspective of Bharatiya Dharmikata. So essentially, as we have seen from the public policy perspective, in the constitutional debate, how we have incorporated various themes from other sources, but sometimes we feel missing the Indianness or Dharmikata over time. So with that intention, the Samskruti Talks tries to imply how our Bharatiya ethos or Dharmikata can be mainstreamed in the existing policy. Like we have been listening in management schools how Panchatantra stories, Mahabharata, Ramayana are incorporated in the management practices. But why can't the same be incorporated in our daily public policy making at the state, national and local level? So we have a huge history right from southern India, Krishnadevaraya, from north, several kingdoms. So for example, take Shivaji. So we always talk about his contribution to warfare. But if you see, less than 30% of his administrative time was spent on wars. So rest of the time was into administration. So we have to dig down that part and learn from those findings and what models can be replicated in our day-to-day in public policy practices. Same is the case with if you go to Tamil Nadu or even Karnataka, southern states, the level of irrigation techniques or the agriculture practice which have been done. So our core intention is to dig down. So through our various talks in the themes, we have worked on environment, family system, philosophy, water, from the all in the theme of all from the heritage and historical perspective. So with that intention, the talks, of course, it is a wider subject. We need to focus down. Our intention is to focus again on how these practices can be mainstreamed in the local government practices, right from the top down. Again, if the bottom top approach or top down or top to bottom, how we can replicate these models. So earlier we have been discussing on constitutional debates, what were missing, what were not missing, and our intention is to add dharmikata in the day-to-day public policy practices. So we have discussed about pluralism, distribution, decentralization. So again, if you see in the presentation, there were several highlights on town planning models. So if you see the current practices like in the local governments, the mayor hardly has any role to play. If you go to New York or any other New York, the Prime Minister of India meets the New York mayor. Does it happen here? No. So when we talk about decentralization, there are several practices. Like if you see Varanasi, it is one of, if you see a history from the town planning perspective, it is one of the best designed town. So prior to that, there was Mohenjo-daro, where was a design was rigid design, so like gridiron pattern. So when flooding happened, whole city is submerged. Thereafter, we never replicated the Mohenjo-daro, Harappan civilization cities in India. So we have come up with Varanasi model where we have given scope for further future expansion. But we have forgotten all those practices and now see how chaos our cities are. So with this Samskruti Talks as a platform, we want to go back to basics and try to gain knowledge from various experts and replicate the same. So if you replicate the same into our policy making through our research, debates and discussions, so that ultimately it reaches to the highest echelon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Siddharth, for your eloquent speech. Yeah. So, thank you very much, sir, for your enlightening and deeply thought-provoking discourse on the specific theme. The Bhagavad Gita reminds us, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya, upadhyekshantite gnanam gnanina sattvadarshinaha. I request, knowledge grows through humility, sincere questioning, and the spirit of learning. We shall now begin the interactive session once again. May I request the participants kindly introduce yourself very briefly before asking the question. Ask one question, one concise question related to the today's topic. And I request the participants to give more chance to the other participants, and we want to get more benefits through this discourse. Thank you. Forum is open now.
I'll take only 2 minutes. It's not a question actually. I want to add something. Our epics are excellent source of learning, especially Ramayana and Mahabharata. There are two concepts very common. One is Dharma Rajya and one is Dharma Rajya. Dharma Rajya is the ideal nation state ruled by an all-powerful king, ensuring justice, equality and prosperity to everyone. After 2000 years after Dharma Rajya came, Mahabharata. And Lord Krishna is considered to be the master architect of Dharma Rajya. The only difference is that he never acted like a all-powerful emperor. He involved others. He actually practiced what is called transformational leadership or visionary leadership by making others leaders to carry out the various missions. So the need for today, legislation alone is not going to help. We have to practice transformational leadership, catch them young, produce more and more leaders from every strata of society, teach them what we have learned today so that it becomes very easy. That is the only way I think we can achieve the concept of Dharma Rajya in India. Thank you, sir.
Please introduce.
I am Dr. Satyanarayana, a retired scientist from Indian Institute of Chemical Technology. Well, my query to you is, if you look at Udyoga Parva, Narada and Dharma Rajya in their conversation, they speak about, the Raj Dharma. Okay? And if you look at the Raj Dharma as the conversation goes and during that period in Udyoga Parva, most of it, on prima facie, you see that it is embedded into the constitution. So, in that view, as the consensus many of them have expressed, the constitution makers are not novices. They were actually, following dharma and all these things. But then, to me, the fundamental difference is when Raj Dharma was actually narrated or proposed or articulated by Narada, the basic premise of this Raj Dharma is dharma. Whereas the constitution makers, for whatever reasons, I may be wrong, but then I felt that, when they were making this constitution, they wanted to be more politically correct, and that's the reason the constitution which was already there existing with English persons, so that with the Britishers, that was actually more or less had a large influence, and that is the reason we had the premise under which the constitution was made, to my understanding, was based on crime and punishment, not on dharma. And that is the reason when the penal code was made, it was called Indian Penal Code. That is, you are punishing someone for something, okay? And not dharma was not the
prime reason for that. So when you're trying to juxtapose Raj Dharma versus the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita as it's now called, okay, there should be some commonality, and then the basic premise should be Dharma, and that is what, in the vision that you have stated, the last thing that the premise should be on Dharma. So how do we actually have this transformation happening from crime and punishment to a Dharma-based society?
Very nice submission.
Essentially, again, we can't contrast the ideals as much. On the face of it, ideals would be very similar. There should be delivery of justice. But then, that's where, as you said, right, is it simply crime and punishment or the philosophy? But there is no philosophy that comes in the constitution, and which is the main challenge. So how do you actually refute or change something that you have not stated and merely assumed? Which is why this articulation of theory is required, because it has to become a pretext based on which the constitutions actually derive. And that's the work not to be done in the scope of legislative per se, and which is also why the constitution could not actually realize most of it. So in spirit, I don't disagree. But then to be able to go about it, we will need to structure this in a way that we ensure we articulate those things that derive into what can be called a constitution of the future.
Thank you, sir. So once again, I request the participants to introduce yourself while asking the question. Please ask the question very briefly.
Namaste, Sabhaya Namaha. My name is Fanindra, and I really appreciate the efforts to discuss on the delta about the Hindu Rashtra and Dharma with the constitution. But my question is, these are all very brainstorming sessions, but when it comes to action, how are we going to bring this to action where we'll inherit back the knowledge and wisdom given by our ancestors back into action?
So the action is why the approaches are mentioned. Action is happening. Let us say the reform is primarily the approach that people have taken. System design is not the approach that we have so far considered taking. So the interpretative way, trying to see that our original spirit was meant to be dharmic, and then reinterpreting the legislations as part of judicial procedures, as part of policy actions also. So it's not that the work is not happening. The approach of the work today, as it stands, has been largely reformative, with the assumption that the present system will remain and then we will only be able to change it. What I am suggesting is that there can be a different approach also, where we actually can envisage things and state it in a way that we can bring into discourse something more futuristic.
Namaste everybody. Dharma Rajya, so many religions were not there that time. I think the same dharma was followed by the entire nation or entire Rajya. But now the same 2047 is given by somebody else here. I think everybody know that 2047 is given by some other people, so they want to change it or something. But now, so whatever the dharma, is it to be some people, that is a 2/3 of the people of India, or other 1/3 people of the India, this dharma will follow. So that is because we are practically we are discussing here, the practical is not, it is only absolute, that is this way we are discussing it. But when it comes to the practical, I think, is it possible to get Hindu Rashtra by 2047 or some other Rashtra by 2047? So that what reality we have to get, or what this one we should get it, that is, that means we have to change, or we have to change everybody. But the ethical and moral values are not there here now in the people, many of them. So unless Though so many very intelligent people are sitting in one room and we are discussing about this, and because I really appreciate that young boy. So we can see only one or two young boys are there. All of them, they are white-haired people only. So how this will go to the youth? It has to go to the youth first. So otherwise, we are not going to stay for 2047, whether it's possible or not. But these things or whatever we are discussing, you should not end only in one room. It has to go to the youth. Is there any method to go to the youth? This thing, or we are able to do any other procedure to go to the youth? And please clarify this.
So, madam, the simple answer is all that depends on how much work we are doing from now and between 2047.
Yes.
Again, there is work. It's not that there is no work happening. There is today a lot of work that we are aware that is happening, which we were not aware maybe 20 years ago. Maybe people were actually working, but we were not aware. Today, more people are able to know that others are working because of the information. But then, because the expectations were so low, we could only articulate very little. My point is, we will have to see bigger possibilities to be able to articulate them. And then, given the collective energy and the momentum that we have today, it is huge. We can't on one hand say that we are 70% backward and then on the other hand we are in the world economy, fourth biggest and things like that. There is a fundamental paradox in all these statements. So whatever political correctness it is, that's fine, but then we'll need to understand the positive side of it, that we are actually big and there is a huge collective momentum. And the society is a lot more aspirational than the discourse is made out to be. And that aspiration is there in everybody. The point is what kind of collective goals we articulate, which people resonate with. And which was the reason I brought the example of the Ayodhya movement and all that. Because every single time in this nation when a good leader gave a good slogan or a goal, the society has responded. That is the nature of this society. I mean, that we can't deny as a fact. So the point comes down to how much can we influence the statement of the collective goals.
That's the next generation. But
Yes,
we can
sir.
start at home. We can go and propagate.
Yeah, in an individual capacity, yes, sir. But systemically, I'm saying that it's not that the institutional work is not happening. It's just that we'll need to get more handle on it.
It's possible.
Namaskaram, sir. Na peru Umameshwar, retired banker. I have two questions, sir. One thing is there is a force and counter force. The force is we are trying to propagate the dharma and bring it into practice and all that. Whereas the counter force is a bad propaganda or narrative which is working very strongly through various channels to counter this and to smother it. Okay, how do we tackle this problem? Second one, the second question is, as Madam has put it, if you see the proportion of youngsters in this whole gathering, maybe it's around 10% or maybe 15%. But this generation is asking, is not asking, questioning. If I say put forth some idea forward, or even my achievements in the Ayurveda or other sciences, this is now you are bringing up, which has been deliberately kept and wrapped for centuries, and now this is questioning this old wisdom or science or whatever it is, whereas the same generation, maybe the portion is other portion, but they are accepting the bad propaganda without questioning it, which is quite contradictory in the thinking of the generation as such. How do you handle this problem? These are the two questions, sir.
So, sir,
Thank you, sir.
I'll give you some counter examples, not to argue, but to say that
Sure, sir.
if you look at most of the policy boot camps today, public policy workshops, there are youngsters. When I did a workshop in Delhi, I gave a 3-day session on how we can formulate problem spaces, research problems on this subject. It's all youngsters. Now, in fact, youngsters are entering formal research on these matters, which they were not earlier. I mean, we should not probably conflict the public discourse with the systematic work on these matters. Systematic work, academic work will take time, but as long as we see that the work is happening, we are sure that the results will come. So that's one side of it.
Good evening all. I am Dr. Suresh Babu. I am a retired general manager from Electronic Corporation of India Limited. I don't have any question actually, and as few of other people have pointed out, if you see the average age of presence in this hall is almost nothing less than 58 to 60, if I am sure. If we can bring it down to 35 to 40, probably at least maybe for after 50 years at least we can see a Dharma Rajya, the transformation to Dharma Rajya is possible, sir. And if this foundation can put some efforts to bring these discourses to the college level or university level, if you can organize these discourses there, of course I can also help because I have a lot of contacts with academic institutes. That will probably, I think, make more changes in the country, sir, actually. Otherwise it will limit only for the discussion in the four walls.
So public discourse, yes sir, I partly agree, but again, in the system, if we see the mission, the Karma Yogi and all this, the work is being done primarily by relatively young people who are doing these IKS workshops for the public servants, civil servants and all this. The people working on the ground are actually youngsters. They are not all, you know.
Shankara Bharadwaj himself is an example to you to be a youngster. Who was doing the research since 10 years.
Small submission. So, further proceedings, still it will take time. So I request only one question, one participant to ask the question. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Parag. I'm also in IT field. First of all, thanks to my friend who invited me, and then it is really eye-opener and came to know that such things are happening. But in the same thing, the vision of 2047 is very good. Okay. Yeah, the vision is good. And as you said, if you give a high goal, everybody works for that. But the question is, where is awareness? Because in 20 years, we all will be much older, and the people who need to basically join that movement or who need to basically make it happen, I'm assuming that there is a program which will create awareness about it. So your comment on that.
So which is what is the collective memory, right? The system has its memory and the society has its memory. Now, when something gets articulated as a goal at the system level and at the level of society, it does get action only in that direction. The state doctrine has been consistent for us. I mean, while all the political correctness, the opportunism is there, we know that things that got articulated as state doctrine have stayed in the system memory for decades, and there has been consistent progress. So that thing happens underneath. The noise outside remains, but then what we are talking of is the principles that we correct, based on which the system memory, so which is exactly why we need to state the goals that way, so that once they get seated now, the system does work in that direction until then.
Once you say that these are the goals, and these goals can come through Dharma Rajya. But what is the Dharma Rajya that awareness is required?
That's one. The other way to look at it is, you state these are common sense dharma anyway. Nothing is preventing the Indian state from saying this is my goal for Vikasit Bharat. How can you have Vikasit Bharat with majority backward population? Right? I mean, this can be your Vikasit Bharat. I can call it Vikasit only when all these conditions are met.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So once again, please forgive me for not allowing you to ask many questions because running short of time. So definitely, if time permits, after completion of the proceedings, we can interact with speaker. Thank you for all your meaningful questions. Now I invite Sri Shankara Bharadwaj to present his concluding remark.
I think I am
Done? Good. So thank you very much, sir. Our sincere gratitude to you, sir, sharing your profound insights with us this evening as token of our appreciation and respect. I request Dr. U.M. Chaudhary ji. Yes, I request all of you to give a big round of applause to our speaker. Thank you. I request Dr. U.M. Chaudhary ji to kindly present the memento to our esteemed speaker.
Okay, we'd like to call out the name of all the eminent personalities who registered later on. Mr. Bhaskara Pantula Mohanji, former acting president, National Company Law Tribunal.
You can read.
That's okay. That's okay. Mr. Bandigiri Shravan Kumar ji, IT professional at Arict Global Technologies. Parag Pathak ji, competency head Tech Mahindra Limited. Kasi Reddy Venkat Reddy ji, retired professor of Telugu Vishwa Hindu Parishad. Dr. Satyanarayan Nanduri ji, consultant research and development chief scientist at CSIR IICT Hyderabad. Khandavalli Aditya Bharadwaj ji, software engineer RASS. Dr. Smita Pathak ji, you don't have the details here. Okay, I would request if you can. Okay. So the larger audience just. Thank you.
By qualification, I am a veterinary doctor. But now, currently, I am into the study of Indian knowledge system. I am a seeker and I am a learner. Thank you.
Thank you. Uma Maheshwar Kanthanji, retired AGM State Bank of India. Rajshekhar Kazaji is a director at Google. Okay. Dr. Subbarao M. Gauravaruppi, he's a scientist at ICMR, National Institute of Nutrition. Rajshekhar ji, producer at Dyuksha Media. Dr. Subbarao M. Okay, it's repeated over here. Okay. Amrita HKG, independent academician. Tigulla Aruna Kumari ji, retired school assistant, government school Kamareddy. N. Kameshwari ji, retired lecturer at Samskruti Foundation. S. Raghavendra ji, he has a business in cyber systems. K. Ranganathan ji, retired AGM NTPC Limited. Dr. Sadhu Suresh Babu ji, Electronics Corporation. V. Prem Kumar ji, retired government employee, EFL University, Hyderabad. K. S. Kulkarni ji, retired manager, New India Assurance. Sudhir Babu ji, Capgemini Associate Director, HR. Kiran Anishetty ji, faculty of UPSC and advocate of High Court of Telangana. Dr. Maruti Sharma Mannava ji, professor and HOD Department of Community Medicine at Kamineni Institute of Medical Sciences. Prabhuraj Thota ji is a student at Dharma Jagaran. K. Ravindranath ji, retired accounts officer, Transco. Narsimha Rao Goparaju ji, retired scientist DRDO. Sivakumar ji, student at Shine India. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your wonderful introduction of the attendees. So one small submission to you. So I would like to introduce Dr. Ravindra Babuji. He is the governing council member. So we are welcoming you for the session, sir. Once again, thank you very much. Gratitude is the noblest expression of culture. So I request Siddharth Ayyagari to propose vote of thanks.
So first of all, we thank everyone for on this auspicious occasion. Especially special thanks to Mr. Shankara Bharadwaj Garu for his outstanding presentation. It was quite stimulative and thought-provoking. So everyone, I am sure after stepping out of this campus, we will be thinking on various themes said by what was discussed by Mr. Bharadwaj Garu on various themes like how we think and how the dharmic thinking was. So we will be transitioning to this process, and also thanks to the participants, because without your presence the discussion would not have been wouldn't have been so productive and thought provoking. Once again thank you very much. And also there is all the recordings will be published in YouTube by name Samskruti Foundation Studio. Request you to please subscribe. So almost out of 14, close to 14 to 14 videos are updated. And also follow the website will be made live in couple of days. All the transcripts of these talks will be published in the website. Request you to please follow, share, and hopefully more youngsters will be coming into the next session. Okay, thank you so much. Let's proceed with the dinner.
Yeah. Excuse me. So we have reached to the conclusion of the program. So today's discourses by Siddharth as well as our main speaker Shankara Bharadwaj reminded us that dharma is not merely a philosophy, it's the way of life. Let us conclude with the timeless declaration Dharma eva hato hantaha dharmo rakshati rakshitaha, which has been taken from Manusmriti. Dharma protects those who protect it. May we all strive to uphold dharma in our lives and contribute to a just, harmonious and enlightened society. And I now invite Ms. Srividya to lead us in the Shanti Mantra.
सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामया, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Thank you all for your gracious presence and active participation during the session. I request all of you please be seated for a second. On behalf of Samskruti Foundation, we wish you a pleasant evening. Dinner has been arranged for all the participants. I request all of you to join for the dinner. Namaste.